In this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the tanker Marinera is eastbound and down. I'm your host, Sal Mercagliano. Welcome to today's episode. So I had planned to do an episode on the tanker Bella 1 that was Marinera's previous name. I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize. I know it's not Marinera. I made that. I'm sure it's not that. But I was planning to do the video on Bella 1, but I was actually waiting because I was foreseeing a potential military operation happening. And on the evening of January 2nd, this morning on January 3rd, the U.S. conducted its military operation. This was a snatch and grab of Nicolas Maduro and his wife. They have been captured. They've been taken out of Venezuela. They're on board the USS Iwo Jima, which is a amphibious assault ship. They are heading probably to either Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, or to Puerto Rico for extradition over to New York for trial. But that's not what we're talking about in this video. I want to talk about what this means now for the sanctions and economic blockade that has been enacted by the Trump administration against Venezuela, and particularly why is it a ship like Marinera and now Hyperion, another ship that's recently been reflagged to Russia, are being allowed to basically escape. There was a lot of discussion about why Bella 1 was able to evade the United States Navy. I want to put that into some context and talk about it today. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Now, I'm not going into detail about the military assault on Venezuela. There are plenty of other sites that do it. I recommend heading over to good friend of the show, Ward Carroll's site. Also, Preston Stewart. I was just recently on Preston's channel. I'm not sure how quick he's going to be able to get a video up because he's literally over in Ukraine right now. Also, Cappy Army, another site. I haven't been on Cappy's site, but I've helped and assisted in some of the videos he's put together. And then, of course, Ryan Macbeth and his site. I've been on Ryan's show before. We had a great time up in Newport, Rhode Island not too long ago. So let's focus on what is happening now regarding tankers in and out of Venezuela. So President Trump gave about a 1 hour long press conference down at Mar-a-Lago this morning, January 3rd, on the operation. But the one I want to focus on was the statements by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that is General Kane. And General Kane went into some details about the operations. Of course, they cannot reveal everything because of military necessity. However, one of the things he mentioned is they had been waiting up to about 15 days to launch this operation, meaning that they had to have Navy, Air, Army, Land, Marine, everyone in place for up to 15 days because they were waiting for weather. They were waiting for Nicolas Maduro to be in the right spot. And so that meant that basically the U.S. had to focus its military attention down into the area around Venezuela. This goes to the story of the Bella 1. Now, Bella 1 was a tanker that was coming into the region. It had actually turned around outside of the Windward-Leeward Islands and proceeded out into the Atlantic. And this began the epic chase, hence the thumbnail image here using what was the most famous slow-speed chase in all of human history, O.J. Simpson. So that was kind of the joke there. But a lot of people were commenting that the U.S. can't even catch a 300,000-ton 15-knot supertanker out in the middle of the Atlantic. Well, I think there was more to it than that. So another good friend of the show, Ian Ellis, has been updating this chart showing the deployment of air and naval assets down in U.S. Southern Command. If you don't follow Ian over on X, you really should. Some of the things he highlights, obviously, of course, is the deployment of military forces in and around the Caribbean. I think that he nails almost all these. I would add one more, and that is potentially a military site in and around Trinidad, because Trinidad's another key area. We've seen the use of these bases, plus there is a use of a base in Ecuador. He also has highlighted the deployment in and around Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has taken a renewed emphasis, including the previously closed Navy base at Roosevelt Roads. I'm envisioning that Rosie Roads may get a rebirth out of this. And then, of course, there are the issue of naval forces that are down in the area. And again, we're getting a lot of coverage about U.S. naval forces. Principally, you have really three main groups. You have the USS Ford strike group that is down in the area. You have some surface combatants that are down in the area. And then you have the amphibious ready force. This is the Iwo Jima, and it's attached LPDs. So there are 4 ships with civilian merchant mariner crews that played a big role in the operation. The first is USNS Kanawha. Now, it's a government-owned vessel called an oiler. These are ships that provide underway replenishment to ships at sea. This is Kanawha coming out of Ponce in southern Puerto Rico. Kanawha has been providing the bulk of the fuel for all the surface combatants down in the area, including the aviation fuel necessary for the Gerald R. Ford. So Kanawha is definitely one of those key players. Then in port together here on the left is the USNS Robert Peary. This is what's called an AKE, or a general cargo ammunition vessel. This ship does most of the dry stores and ammunition needed for vessels. So food, toilet paper, bullets, missiles, you name it, all that type of ordnance is necessary is on board them. And then to the right there is USNS Supply. Supply is a fast version of Kanawha and Robert E. Peary thrown together. So, you take about half of what Kanawha can do, half of what Robert E. Peary can do, throw it into one hull, and ramp it up to speeds of about 30 knots. The Peary and the Kanawha could do about 20 knots. Supply is designed really to be the fast replenishment, one-stop, get-all for underway replenishment for naval strike groups. And the 4th vessel down there is this vessel. This is the motor vessel Ocean Trader. Now, I've done an entire video on Ocean Trader. I'll have it linked up above there for you. Ocean Trader is a commercial ship. This is a ship that was owned by Maersk Lines. It's now operated under a firm, USMMI, and under charter to the United States through the Navy's Military Sealift Command. Specifically, it operates with the Special Operations Command. It is a modified roll-on, roll-off vessel. Up forward of the house, you'll notice these 2 big bay doors. Those are for helicopters. On the side, those ports there allow you to launch watercraft. On the stern area right here, you have a large berthing compartment with an area back aft in which to launch drones. So this vessel is really a jack of all trade. Now, I do have a couple of concerns about the use of this vessel, because this is a commercial vessel. It is not owned by the U.S. government. The previous ships I showed you are all what's called USNS, U.S. naval ships. Ocean Trader is a motor vessel, meaning it is owned by a commercial firm. It is not a government-owned vessel. And when you look at Ocean Trader, she has a very kind of unique capability. Go back over here to Ian Ellis's chart. You can see they can embark on board Ocean Trader helicopters, including MH-60 Blackhawks and MH-6 Little Bird. So you can launch offensive operations off the deck of this vessel, but it is a civilian vessel, so I do have some concerns about using a civilian vessel. If she was USNS owned by the government, I think that alleviates a lot of issues, but being a motor vessel, there are some interesting little kind of gray areas associated with that. Now, also down in the area that was down here, and go back over to Ian's chart here, there are a couple of submarines. There are bombers being deployed out from the continental United States, both B-1s and B-52s. So we probably saw the strikes being launched with Tomahawk land attack missiles, what are known as TLAMs. And then up here you have the chart that shows the 3 Dark Fleet oil tankers that were targeted by the United States. And these are really key here. The first 2, the motor tanker Skipper and the motor tanker Centuries, were seized by the United States, and those ships are now at anchor off the coast of Houston, Texas. Now, Skipper had been flagged in Guyana. However, that was a false flag. The ship was not registered in that country. Therefore, she was a stateless vessel. In Article 110, Section D of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, the U.S. and any country has the right to board a vessel, and once on board that vessel, they can inspect that vessel. And since they found the vessel to be stateless, and there was a federal warrant against the vessel, the ship was sailed into Houston. In the case of the Centuries, the ship was Panamanian flagged, but Panama had announced that they had withdrawn the registry, plus the U.S. has a treaty with Panama to be able to board their vessels. So that ship was subsequently seized and brought into the United States. Then we come to Bella 1, and Bella 1 was the interesting one, because Bella 1 was heading to Venezuela. It had not arrived yet into Venezuela. Both Centuries and Skipper had been loaded, but Bella 1 was empty. And Bella 1 was outside the Windward-Leeward Islands when word came out that the ship had reversed course and was being actively pursued by the U.S. And there was even allegations that it had been boarded, but that subsequently turned out not to be the case. Now, this all takes place in the backdrop of the U.S. operation against Venezuela, because while the U.S. has been conducting strikes against narco boats in both the Caribbean and the Pacific, this is one element of this, alleging that the Maduro regime is responsible for these boats, the U.S. has also been targeting sanctioned oil and sanctioned tankers. Now, there are commercial tankers coming in and out of Venezuela and sailing their merry way, including some under Chevron that are sailing out of Venezuela heading up to the United States. I know, it's weird. We get this story from Reuters. Venezuela's oil facilities are unscathed in U.S. strike, so this is not a surprise. The U.S. wants to see Venezuela producing oil. In particular, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, has announced that he wants to see basically a return of lost property to the United States. This goes back to the nationalization of oil facilities in Venezuela under the previous regime, not Maduro, but Chavez's regime. Who knows what's going to happen next here when it comes to those oil facilities. Same time, we get this. U.S. is targeting Venezuela's shadow fleet in the final 2025 sanctions blitz. So prior to the attack, we saw this last attack against the ships that were engaged in transporting oil. Remember, while Maduro is out, his vice president has assumed control in Venezuela. So there is a question about who will continue in power in Venezuela. The U.S. is talking about taking power in Venezuela, but you still have the regime that's in place there exercising control. At the same time, we're seeing more Venezuela-bound oil ships conduct their U-turns. They're heading away from this, including 2 Chinese-flagged tankers that we're going to talk about. And that's where we get to this story and the case of Bella 1 or Marinera. So a second shadow tanker off Venezuela has reflagged to Russia. This is referring to the tanker Hyperion. This is a tanker we've talked about before. She had been sitting off the coast of Venezuela, but that ship has now shifted over to Russian registry, and it follows the case of Bella 1. Now, changing registries is a very interesting issue. Under Article 92 of UNCLOS, and yes, I know everybody's screaming at the TV right now, the U.S. has not ratified UNCLOS. Got it. However, it is the law of the sea. It doesn't matter if the U.S. ratifies it or not. Enough countries have ratified it. It is the de facto law of the sea. It's just like if you disagree with a law, but everyone else signs it off, it is the law, no matter what you disagree with. But under Article 92, it says this: ships shall sail under the flag of one state only, and save in exceptional cases expressly provided for in international treaties or in convention, shall be subjected to its exclusive jurisdiction on the high seas. A ship may not change its flag during a voyage or while in a port of call. Now, I have tweeted and sent this out quite a bit, but there is an exception to it. Save in the case of a real transfer of ownership or change of registry. So under a voyage, a ship cannot legally change its registry unless its ownership changes. Now, to be Russian registry, you have to be Russian owned, which means that the ships, in this case, Bella 1 and Hyperion, can't just sit there and paint a Russian flag on the side and sit there and say, hey, Pajala, you have to actually change your registry and your ownership, which raises the issue because the United States is not quite buying into this argument. So you get this story. Russia asks U.S. to halt pursuit of tanker after crew claims Russian flag. So the diplomatic request delivered late on New Year's Eve to the State Department and the White House Homeland Security Council concerned the tanker formerly known as Bella 1. Vessel, which originated from Iran, was en route to Venezuela to load oil. According to the Times, American officials maintain the ship was flying a false flag when initially approached on December 20th, making it a stateless vessel subject to boarding under international law. In a bid to claim protection, the crew painted a crude Russian flag on the vessel's hull and radioed the Coast Guard claiming Russian authority. The ship subsequently appeared in the Russia's official maritime register of shipping under a new name, the Marinera, with Sochi listed as its home port. Dave Tannenbaum, a former Treasury Department sanctions compliance officer, told the Times that Russia's, quote, overnight flag registration, unquote, validity remains unclear under international law. So a couple of things stand out here I want to talk about. Number one, why was this ship not boarded? I think because this ship was outside the Caribbean Sea, there were not sufficient American naval assets to do it. To conduct a boarding operation doesn't mean you just need a helicopter and fast rope down. you need multiple helicopters. You need a boarding team that's cleared to do this. You need Coast Guard personnel to do it. And then you need a crew to go on board the vessel and take possession of it. If you don't have those assets in place, then doing a boarding does you no good. And I think because the U.S. had stationed its forces and had been waiting for 15 days to execute the snatch of Maduro and his wife, they could not peel off assets to go chasing after Bella 1. We also get this story that the Chinese are diverting to Nigeria a very large crude carrier as U.S. tightens the Venezuelan oil sanctions. So we have two Chinese very large crude carriers. One's off the coast of Guyana, one is on an approach to Venezuela, and now we have them diverting off. So if we look at marine traffic, we can see how this plays out. The two Chinese vessels, the Thousand Sunny right here, and the Xinghe, I don't know if I'm saying that right, I apologize, but Thousand Sunny has now turned. She was heading on a course for Venezuela. She's now heading up, we believe, up to Nigeria, at least the west coast of Africa. Xinghe is still sitting off the coast of Guyana at this time. Both Centuries and Skipper are at anchor off the coast of Houston. And here we see Marinera. This was Bella 1. If we pull this route back 30 days, you can see where Bella 1, the Marinera, was coming out of the Mediterranean, heading here, stopped right off the Windward Isles, and then went blank. The dashed line here shows you where she went dark on her AIS. She just recently appeared in the North Atlantic. She's a very large crude carrier. She cannot really get into the Black Sea or the Baltic, so she is probably heading up to the Arctic right now, to those northern Arctic ports. There was a great post by Samir Madani and the crew over at Tanker Trackers talking about how the ship was probably going to be running out of fuel soon, so she's going to need a fueling stop. So the ship is probably heading up to the Arctic region, potentially to load oil in Russian oil, if she has a Russian owner right now. Then you see Hyperion here coming out of the Caribbean now. She is also angling out and heading into the Atlantic. The flagging of the ships by Russia is an interesting move because one of the things we've seen happen over the past 80 years is the use of these open registries, these flags of conveniences that exist where you can register a ship and not really worry about a lot of issues. Now, that has changed over time. We've increased the ability of nations to inspect vessels through what's called port state control. When you bring a vessel into a port, if you come into the United States, for example, the U.S. Coast Guard has the right to board you and ensure you're meeting the standards set under international conventions, the safety of life at sea, marine pollution, fire and rescue, you name it, all those elements. However, if those ships stay out of port state control, they can operate in this kind of void space. And one of the things we talked about in our last episode, where we talked about what to look for in 2026, now this parallel fleet with Marinera and Hyperion, for example, being Russian flag, is an interesting case study of this. Are we seeing that development even further? What happens in Venezuela now? Who knows? I don't know yet. All I know is that you're definitely going to see ships avoiding the area as much as they can. The problem is going to be those ships that are in Venezuela right now. Great study done, again, by Tanker Trackers was looking at how much oil capacity there is in tankers to fill up so that the Venezuelans don't have to turn off oil wells, which is a big problem because once you cap and shut down wells, they're hard to start again. So they have capacity. The question is whether or not the United States and Venezuela, with the new government in Venezuela, can come to an agreement to allow the export of oil out of Venezuela. Venezuela sits on one of the largest oil reserves on the planet. Venezuela is the biggest. It is up there with Saudi Arabia. I mean, it's huge. It is massive. And one of the problems you've seen with Venezuela over the past 40 years has been its peaks and troughs in its ability to export oil. It's trying to get 1 million barrels of oil out a day. It needs it for its economy, but obviously under the sanctions imposed by the United States, it has not been able to do that. So the registry of Russia is definitely playing a role here. We're seeing the Chinese not pushing their vessels in right now. However, what happens with Russia? I don't think the U.S. is going to board a Russian ship. Remember, the boardings that have taken place, the Centuries and the Skipper, were done with either stateless vessels or the consent of the registry, Panama in the case of Centuries. I don't foresee the U.S. making a move on a Russian flag vessel. Now, there is a question about the veracity of the Russian flag. Is it truly owned by a Russian company? Does the Russian registry actually, stand the sniff test here? That will be a question that will have to be addressed later on. But Russia is definitely putting their nose into this by saying that they have reflagged that vessel and is now protected by the Russians. We will see what happens next. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit the super thanks button down below, give it a big thumbs up, spread it across social media, and if you can, become a monthly, yearly member of our Patreon site. A lot of great things over on Patreon. I posted 2 papers I've done recently, 2 articles I've done. One is open for everyone. One is behind the paywall for those of you who are paid members of my Patreon. Also post these videos to Patreon without ads so you can see them directly. Also try to post videos early as they become available. Until our next episode, this is Sal. Sign off.